Welcome to Wildlife for Sleep. This channel is a quiet place where nature, wildlife, and ancient worlds come together to help you relax, unwind, and drift into deep rest. If you enjoy calm documentaries like this and find them helpful for sleep or relaxation, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps this channel grow and allows me to create more peaceful content for you. Now get comfortable and let the journey begin. Before the mammoth existed, long before the first woolly mammoth ever walked across frozen ground, long before snow-covered plains stretched endlessly beneath pale northern skies, the earth itself was already changing in slow, patient ways. Continents shifted quietly, oceans cooled, winds learned new paths, ice began to remember how to return. Life, as it always had, adapted without intention. There was no plan, no destination, only survival, repeating itself across generations so numerous, they blurred into time itself. The story of the woolly mammoth does not begin with fur or tusks or ice. It begins millions of years earlier, with heat instead of cold, with forests instead of tundra, and with ancestors that bore little resemblance to the giant most people imagine today. In the warm world of the late Miocene epoch, roughly 5 to 6 million years ago, the planet was greener than it would later become. Grasslands expanded across Africa and Eurasia, replacing dense forests that had dominated earlier ages. This change favored large grazing animals, creatures built for endurance, digestion, and long-distance movement. Among them were early members of the elephant family, known scientifically as proboscideans. These animals already possessed long trunks, thick legs, and powerful bodies, but they lived in climates far removed from ice. Their skin was relatively bare. Their ears were large, designed to release heat rather than conserve it. Their lives revolved around warmth, water, and vegetation abundant enough to sustain enormous bodies. Over time, populations spread outward from Africa into Eurasia. Generation by generation, these animals encountered new landscapes. Some faced colder winters, some crossed mountain ranges, some followed grasslands northward as climates fluctuated. Adaptation was slow. Changes took tens of thousands of years, sometimes longer. A slightly thicker coat here, a change in tooth shape there, a body marginally better at conserving heat. None of these adaptations mattered on their own, but together, across uncountable generations, they shaped something entirely new. By the time the Pliocene epoch gave way to the early Pleistocene, around 2.5 million years ago, the Earth had entered a rhythm of ice ages. Glaciers advanced and retreated, repeatedly reshaping continents, lowering sea levels, and creating vast regions of cold, dry land known as steppe tundra. This environment was harsh, but predictable. Winters were long and brutal. Summers were short, but productive. Grasses, sedges, and hardy plants dominated the landscape, forming one of the most extensive ecosystems the planet has ever known. It was here, in this world of wind and frost, that the direct ancestors of the woolly mammoth emerged. Early mammoths differed from modern elephants in subtle but important ways. Their molar teeth developed higher crowns and more ridges, ideal for grinding abrasive grasses mixed with wind-blown grit. Their bodies became rounder, reducing surface area exposed to cold. Fat layers thickened beneath the skin, storing energy and providing insulation. Hair began to appear first sparse, then denser, then eventually forming the iconic double-layered coat of long guard hairs and fine insulating underfur. Ears grew smaller, tails shortened. Heat loss became the enemy. Tusks, once mostly tools for feeding and defense, began to curve more dramatically. These curves helped sweep snow aside, revealing buried grasses beneath. Every feature was shaped not by design, but by survival pressure, repeated over unimaginable spans of time. By around 400,000 years ago, the woolly mammoth had fully emerged as a distinct species, perfectly adapted to life in the cold. It was not merely surviving the ice age. It was thriving within it. Across northern Eurasia and North America, mammoths became one of the dominant large herbivores. Herds moved slowly across open plains, shaping the landscape with their footsteps, their feeding habits, and their migrations. In many ways, they functioned as living architects of the Ice Age ecosystem. But before a single mammoth calf could be born, before family bonds formed and migrations began, the world itself had to settle into the conditions that would support such giants. Ice sheets locked away vast quantities of water, lowering sea levels and exposing land bridges. One of these, the Bering Land Bridge, connected Siberia to North America, allowing mammoths to spread across continents without ever encountering an ocean. Predators evolved alongside them. Saber-toothed cats, giant wolves, and massive bears learned to track herds, targeting the young, the old, and the weak. Humans, still few and scattered, had not yet become a significant force. For thousands of years, equilibrium held. The land provided. The mammoths adapted. Life continued. This was the stage set for the beginning of an individual mammoth's life. A single birth, quiet and vulnerable, into a world of cold air, towering adults, and endless grasslands stretching beneath an ancient sky. In the next part, the story will narrow from deep time to a single moment: the birth of a woolly mammoth calf. The first breath in freezing air. The beginning of a life that would unfold across decades, shaped by family, climate, danger, and memory. Birth into cold. The birth of a woolly mammoth did not arrive with celebration or sound. There were no rituals, no markers of importance beyond what survival itself demanded. It began quietly, often during the brief window of late spring or early summer, when the frozen ground softened just enough to allow life a fragile foothold. A pregnant female mammoth carried her calf for an exceptionally long time, close to 22 months. This long gestation was not excess, it was necessity. A calf born too small, too weak, or too underdeveloped would not survive the cold, the predators, or the relentless demands of movement. By the time labor began, the calf was already massive, weighing well over 100 kilograms, with bones formed thick and dense, lungs ready to draw breath in air that could freeze exposed flesh. Within minutes, labor itself was dangerous. The mother slowed, her movements deliberate, surrounded closely by the herd. Female mammoths, related through generations, formed protective circles, using their bodies as shields against predators that watched constantly from a distance. In these moments, the strength of social bonds mattered as much as physical power. When the calf finally emerged, wet and steaming against the cold air, the contrast was immediate and severe. The first breath was a shock, lungs expanding violently as icy oxygen rushed inward. The calf stumbled, legs trembling beneath a body still adjusting to gravity, weight, and balance. Standing was not optional. Within minutes, sometimes seconds, the calf struggled upright. Instinct drove it forward toward the warmth and scent of its mother. A mammoth calf that could not stand quickly was vulnerable, in a way that no adult ever was. The mother used her trunk, gently guiding, steadying, lifting when necessary. Other females stood watch, scanning the horizon for movement. Predators understood birth. They waited for it. Wolves, large cats, and scavengers followed herds for this exact moment, hoping for weakness, distraction, or failure. Once standing, the calf searched instinctively for nourishment. Mammoth milk was thick, rich, and dense with fat designed to fuel rapid growth and provide insulation from within. Feeding was frequent, almost constant. During the earliest weeks, the calf drank not only to grow, but to survive temperature extremes that could kill smaller animals outright. The first days were the most dangerous. The calf's coat, though present, was not yet fully developed. Long guard hairs existed, but the dense insulating underfur would take time to thicken. Until then, the calf relied heavily on the warmth of its mother's body and the collective heat of the herd when resting. Sleep came in short intervals. The ground was cold. Snow could fall even in summer. Wind never truly stopped. Every rest carried risk. As days passed into weeks, strength slowly increased. Muscles adapted. Coordination improved. The calf learned to follow the herd's movements, memorizing the rhythm of migration without understanding its purpose. These paths were ancient, repeated across generations, shaped by memory rather than map. Learning came through observation rather than instruction. The calf watched how adults used their tusks. Clear snow. It watched how trunks stripped grasses, broke branches, and gathered water. It learned where to stand during storms and how to position its body against wind. Mistakes were common, but fatal ones were rare only because protection was constant. Social structure defined survival. Mammoth herds were matriarchal, led by the oldest, most experienced female. She carried memory of droughts, storms, predator patterns, and safe routes passed down across decades. For a calf, staying close to the matriarch was staying alive. The mother remained intensely attentive. Separation was dangerous. A calf that wandered even a short distance risked becoming isolated, lost in white landscapes where distance was deceptive and silence concealed threats. As months passed, the calf's diet slowly expanded. It began to mouth grasses, sedges, and low shrubs mimicking adults. Milk remained essential, but solid food introduced the digestive challenges that would define mammoth life. Their massive gut systems evolved specifically to process low-nutrient vegetation, extracting energy slowly, continuously, without pause. Growth was steady but slow. Unlike many animals that mature quickly, mammoths invested in longevity. Childhood lasted years. Dependence remained long after physical strength increased. Winter returned inevitably. The calf's first winter was a test. Few survived without strong social support. Temperatures plunged. Snow deepened. Food became harder to reach. The herd tightened formation, conserving heat and minimizing exposure. Calves stayed near the center, shielded by adults whose bodies absorbed wind and cold. Fur thickened, fat layers increased. The calf adapted not by resisting the cold, but by becoming part of it. Storms passed, days lengthened again, spring returned. The calf, no longer fragile but still far from independent, entered the next phase of life, adolescence, a period of learning, testing boundaries, and preparing for a future defined by movement, memory, and survival, in a world that never forgave weakness. In the next part, the story will follow the young mammoth through growth and adolescence, exploring herd dynamics, learning behavior, play, early dangers, and the slow shaping of an adult built for endurance rather than speed. Growing within the herd. As the seasons continued their endless turning, the young woolly mammoth entered a stage of life, defined not by helplessness, but by learning. Childhood did not end suddenly. It faded slowly, stretched across years, shaped by repetition, observation, and memory. Strength increased steadily, yet dependence remained. In the Ice Age world, growing too fast was dangerous, and growing too slow was fatal. The juvenile mammoth moved with greater confidence now. Legs that once trembled beneath new weight became pillars of endurance. The trunk, once clumsy and uncertain, gained control and precision. It curled around grasses, attested branches, lifted snow, and explored the world through scent and touch. Every movement was practice for a future that demanded constant effort. Play emerged naturally, not as entertainment, but as preparation. Young mammoths pushed each other gently, tested strength, chased and retreated in short bursts across open ground. These interactions built muscle, coordination, and social understanding. Through play, they learned limits. They learned when to yield, when to push back, and how to read the subtle signals of posture and sound that governed herd harmony. The herd itself was a living classroom. Juveniles followed adults closely, mirroring their actions without understanding their deeper purpose. When the matriarch paused, they paused. When she changed direction, they turned. These movements were not random. They reflected knowledge accumulated over decades, knowledge that no single mammoth could afford to lose. Migration routes were learned through repetition. The juvenile memorized landscapes without names, river crossings, wind-sheltered valleys, ridges that remained passable even during heavy snowfall. Memory became survival, and forgetting meant death. Diet expanded fully during these years. Milk faded into the background as grasses, sedges, mosses, and low shrubs became the primary fuel. The young mammoth learned which plants could be eaten safely and which caused illness. Taste mattered. Smell mattered more. Older mammoths demonstrated selection through action, guiding juveniles without direct instruction. Digestion was slow and constant. The mammoth's massive gut system processed enormous volumes of low-quality vegetation day and night. Feeding occupied most waking hours. Rest, when it came, was brief and vigilant. Predators never disappeared. Wolves tested the edges of the herd, probing for weakness. Large cats watched from cover, waiting for separation or injury. Juveniles learned to stay close instinctively, responding to alarm calls and shifts in adult posture before danger was visible. Winter sharpened every lesson. As snow deepened, juveniles practiced clearing techniques, using small tusks and trunks to reach buried grasses. They struggled more than adults, burning energy faster, learning through failure and correction. During storms, they positioned themselves downwind of larger bodies, absorbing warmth and minimizing exposure. These behaviors were not taught. They were absorbed through presence. Tusks began to grow more noticeably during this period. At first, they were short and slightly curved, emerging from the skull as sensitive living structures, rich with nerves and blood supply. They were tools in training, not yet weapons or snow plows, but symbols of the adult form taking shape. Social awareness deepened. Juveniles learned hierarchy, respect, and restraint. Aggression within the herd was rare and controlled. The matriarch's authority was unquestioned, reinforced not through violence, but through experience and presence. A glance, a shift of weight, a low vocalization was enough to restore order. Vocal communication expanded as well. Mammoths used a range of sounds, many too low for human ears, transmitted through the ground as vibrations. Juveniles learned to recognize these signals, responding to calls that announced danger, movement, or reassurance. The earth itself carried messages. Years passed. Slowly, the juvenile mammoth grew larger, heavier, stronger. Fur thickened fully. Fat layers stabilized. Cold became familiar, not hostile. The mammoth no longer reacted to winter with fear, but with routine. At a certain point, subtle changes began to appear. Males and females diverged in behavior. Young males grew more restless, testing boundaries, engaging in more forceful play. Their future would pull them away from the herd toward a more solitary existence defined by competition and wandering. Females, by contrast, remained deeply integrated within the group. Their roles as future mothers and memory keepers were already forming, shaped by proximity to older females and constant exposure to herd leadership. Adolescence was not marked by ceremony. It was recognized through behavior, through independence, through the quiet moment when a mammoth no longer needed constant guidance. Ahead lay adulthood, a life measured not in speed or dominance, but in endurance, memory, and the ability to survive decades in a world shaped by ice, wind, and time itself. In the next part, the story will follow the mammoth into full adulthood, exploring mating behavior, sexual maturity, dominance, migration at scale, and the immense daily demands of sustaining one of the largest land mammals ever to walk the earth. The weight of adulthood. Adulthood did not arrive suddenly for a woolly mammoth. It settled gradually, like winter snow. That fell so often it became invisible. Strength increased before responsibility. Size arrived before wisdom. Only time measured in repeated seasons and remembered landscapes completed the transformation. By the time a mammoth reached full physical maturity, it was immense. Shoulder heights rose beyond 3 meters. Body mass exceeded 6 tons. Muscle layered upon bone, protected by thick fat, and insulated by a dense coat of hair that swayed endlessly in the wind. This size was not for dominance alone. It was a shield against cold, hunger, and exhaustion. For females, adulthood meant deeper integration into the herd. Their movements aligned more closely with the matriarch. They learned the quiet authority of experience, observing how decisions were made not through force but through memory. When to move, when to rest, when to risk crossing ice, when to avoid valleys where snow drifted too deep. For males, adulthood marked separation. As testosterone levels rose and tusks thickened, young males became increasingly restless. Play escalated into testing. Testing turned into sparring. These encounters were rarely lethal, but they were decisive. Eventually, the social fabric shifted and the male drifted away from the herd, not forced out violently, but drawn by instinct toward solitude. Adult male mammoths often traveled alone or in loose bachelor groups. Their lives became defined by long-distance wandering, competition, and periodic returns to herds during mating seasons. This separation reduced internal conflict and protected calves from accidental harm caused by massive bodies and aggressive displays. Mating behavior followed seasonal rhythms. As breeding periods approached, males entered a state similar to musth in modern elephants, marked by heightened aggression, hormonal changes, and increased activity. They followed scent trails across vast distances, locating herds through chemical signals carried by wind and ground vibrations. Competition among males was intense but ritualized. Tusks clashed, bodies pressed. Displays of size and strength determined outcomes more often than outright violence. Serious injury was costly in an environment where healing was slow and survival demanded constant movement. When mating occurred, it was brief. Bonds did not form. The male moved on, driven by biology rather than attachment. The female returned to the rhythm of the herd, carrying the future quietly within her. Pregnancy reshaped daily life. The added weight altered movement. Energy needs increased. The herd adjusted pace subtly, accommodating pregnant females without overt acknowledgement. Survival depended on collective flexibility. Migration defined adult existence. Mammoths were not nomadic without reason. They followed vegetation cycles across enormous territories, sometimes spanning thousands of kilometers over the course of a year. These movements prevented overgrazing, ensured access to fresh growth, and reduced disease buildup in any single area. Paths were ancient. Some routes persisted for tens of thousands of years, etched into memory rather than land. When ice advanced or retreated, routes shifted slowly, adapting over generations rather than abruptly. Weather was constant labor. Wind scoured exposed plains. Snow buried food. Ice formed unpredictably. Adults learned to read subtle signs. In cloud patterns, wind direction, and ground texture, experience mattered. A wrong decision could lead to starvation, drowning, or exposure. Feeding consumed most waking hours. An adult mammoth required hundreds of kilograms of vegetation daily. Tusks became essential tools, sweeping aside snow, breaking ice crusts, and exposing buried grasses. Trunks gathered, sorted, and delivered food continuously. There was no pause. Hunger returned quickly. Rest came in intervals. Mammoths slept standing or lying briefly, never deeply enough to lose awareness entirely. The world was never fully safe. Social bonds strengthened with age. Adults recognized individuals through scent, sound, and appearance. Loss was understood, though not mourned in human terms. When a mammoth died, the herd acknowledged absence through behavior rather than ritual, adjusting spacing, movement, and leadership accordingly. Time moved slowly, yet relentlessly. Years accumulated. Scars appeared. Tusks wore down, sometimes breaking or splitting. Teeth ground against abrasive grasses, molars wearing flat over decades of constant chewing. Dental wear was the silent clock of mammoth life. When teeth failed, survival became increasingly difficult. Still, adulthood endured. Decades passed with remarkable consistency. The mammoth lived through changing ice patterns, shifting predator populations, and subtle climate fluctuations. For most of its existence, the world remained stable enough to support these giants. But stability does not last forever. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the environment began to change. Ice retreated more often than it advanced. Forests crept northward. Grasslands fragmented. New pressures emerged not from nature alone, but from a growing presence that walked upright, carried tools, and learned faster than any predator before it. In the next part, the story will enter a period of quiet tension. The mammoth's later adulthood, a world changing faster than memory could adapt, and the first signs of decline. The long evening. Age arrived quietly for the woolly mammoth without ceremony or warning. There was no single moment when strength disappeared or endurance failed. Instead, change revealed itself through accumulation, through stiffness in joints that once moved without resistance, through tusks worn unevenly by decades of labor, through teeth that no longer met as cleanly as they once had. An aging mammoth still looked powerful. From a distance, nothing appeared different. Size remained. Fur still rippled in the wind. The body carried the same monumental presence it always had. But inside, time was working steadily, invisibly, shaping the final phase of life. Teeth were the first true limit. Mammoths, like modern elephants, relied on a finite number of molars that erupted sequentially throughout life. Each set was massive, ridged, and designed for grinding. Abrasive vegetation. Over years of constant use, those ridges flattened, enamel thinned. Eventually, chewing became inefficient. An older mammoth could still feed, but it required more time, more effort, and greater energy expenditure to extract the same nutrition. Weight slowly declined. Fat reserves thinned. Endurance faded, though rarely enough to stop movement entirely. Within the herd, older individuals often walked more slowly. The group adjusted subtly, not stopping. but shortening distances, altering timing, choosing safer routes. Memory still mattered, perhaps more than ever. The matriarch, often the oldest female, carried decades of environmental knowledge. She remembered rivers that dried in certain summers, valleys that flooded without warning, plains that once supported grass but no longer did. In times of uncertainty, her decisions guided survival. But the world was changing in ways memory could not fully prepare for. As the Ice Age waned, climates warmed unevenly. Winters became less predictable. Summers grew wetter in some regions, drier in others. Grasslands fragmented as shrubs and trees expanded northward. The open-steppe tundra that mammoths depended on began to break apart into patches separated by forests, wetlands, and unstable terrain. This was not sudden. It unfolded over thousands of years, slow enough to seem manageable, fast enough to outpace long-lived animals. Adapted to stability, migration routes stretched longer. Food became harder to locate consistently. Snow cover changed, sometimes deeper, sometimes thinner, but crusted with ice that made feeding difficult. Each year demanded adjustment. Predators adapted as well, but none altered the balance as profoundly as humans. At first, humans were a distant presence. Small groups scattered, cautious. They followed mammoth herds rather than controlled them. Early encounters were rare and often avoided by both sides. Over time, human populations grew, tools improved, cooperation increased, knowledge passed quickly between generations. Humans learned mammoth behavior, migration, timing, and vulnerabilities. An aging mammoth became a target not because it was weak, but because it was predictable. Humans did not need to overpower mammoths physically. They needed patience, coordination, strategy. They used landscape features, exhaustion, and injury to their advantage. A single hunt could involve dozens of people working together, driving a mammoth toward soft ground, steep terrain, or icy water. For the mammoth, these encounters were new. Predators had always hunted, but never with such planning, such persistence, or such efficiency. Older mammoths were often the first lost, their pace slower, their reactions slightly delayed. Each loss echoed through the herd, not emotionally in the human sense, but functionally. Leadership shifted, memory thinned. Calves still were born. Life continued, but the balance was tilting. Isolation increased. As habitats fragmented, herds became smaller, more separated. Genetic diversity declined. Some populations retreated to refuges where conditions remained suitable. Islands, northern plains, remote regions spared the worst of environmental change. One such refuge lay in the far north, where cold lingered longest and human presence arrived late. Here, mammoths endured longer than anywhere else. But endurance was not immortality. Aging mammoths eventually reached a point where feeding could no longer sustain the body. Teeth worn nearly flat, chewing failed. Starvation came slowly, often during harsh winters when energy demands peaked and food access was hardest. Death, when it arrived, was quiet. A mammoth might fall behind during migration. It might lie down and fail to rise again. Predators and scavengers followed, returning nutrients to the land. The herd moved on. Life had always been cyclical. But now the cycle's short. Populations declined. Births no longer replaced deaths. Landscapes no longer recovered between migrations. Human pressure increased rather than faded. The woolly mammoth entered its final era, not with catastrophe, but with a quiet disappearance. In the next part, the story will move toward the end of the species itself, exploring the final mammoth populations, extinction theories, genetic evidence, and the last known individuals who walked beneath Ice Age skies. After the footsteps faded, when the last woolly mammoth disappeared, the world did not immediately notice what had been lost. There was no record, no memory preserved in words, no moment marked by awareness. The land adjusted quietly, slowly, in ways that would only become visible long afterward. Grasslands shifted, shrubs spread, forests advanced into places once kept open by constant grazing and trampling. The mammoth had not merely lived within its ecosystem, it had shaped it. Across the Ice Age plains, mammoths functioned as engineers of the landscape. Their feeding prevented trees from overtaking grasslands. Their footsteps compacted snow, allowing cold to penetrate deeper into the soil, stabilizing permafrost. Their dung returned nutrients to the ground, supporting plant growth that fed entire communities of animals. When they vanished, these processes weakened or disappeared entirely. In regions where mammoths once maintained open steppe, tundra slowly transformed. Mosses replaced grasses, shrubs spread, snow accumulated deeper in winter, insulating the soil rather than cooling it. Over thousands of years, these changes altered carbon storage, water flow, and local climates in subtle but lasting ways. The mammoth's absence reshaped the planet long after its body was gone. Human understanding of this legacy emerged slowly. For centuries, mammoth remains were curiosities. Tusks were mistaken for horns of mythical creatures. Bones inspired legends rather than knowledge. Only with the rise of modern science did these remains begin to speak clearly. Frozen carcasses preserved in permafrost revealed astonishing detail. Hair still attached, skin intact, stomachs filled with the last meals eaten thousands of years earlier. From these remains, scientists reconstructed diets, a seasonal movement, and even the illnesses mammoths endured. Genetic material recovered from frozen tissue transformed the mammoth from an extinct symbol into a living dataset. DNA sequences revealed close relationships to modern elephants, confirmed population bottlenecks, and exposed the gradual accumulation of harmful mutations in isolated groups, especially those that survived longest in places like Rangel Island. These discoveries reshaped extinction narratives. The mammoth was not simply hunted to death. It was not simply frozen out by climate change. Its disappearance was the result of overlapping pressures acting faster than a long-lived species could adapt. This realization changed how scientists think about extinction today. The mammoth became a warning. In recent years, discussions have turned toward restoration rather than remembrance. Some researchers have proposed reintroducing large grazers into northern ecosystems to restore grassland dynamics. Others have explored the controversial idea of extinction, using mammoth DNA to influence the genetics of modern elephants, not to recreate the mammoth exactly, but to restore lost ecological functions. These ideas remain debated, complex, and ethically challenging. They raise questions not only about science, but about responsibility. Should humans attempt to reverse extinctions they helped cause? Should ancient ecosystems be rebuilt in a world that has already changed? Should the past be revived or only studied? Regardless of these questions, the mammoth's influence continues. It lives in the soil chemistry of former steppe, in the genetic memory of elephants, in the cautionary frameworks used to assess modern species facing rapid climate change and human expansion. The woolly mammoth's life cycle from birth to extinction was never separate from its environment. It rose because the world shaped it. It fell because the world changed. Faster than adaptation allowed. This is not a story of failure. It is a story of alignment, endurance, and limits. For hundreds of thousands of years, mammoths lived exactly as they were meant to live. They survived ice, wind, hunger, predators, and darkness. They raised generations. They shaped continents. Their success was vast, measured not in domination, but in persistence. When conditions shifted beyond that balance, they faded not in panic, but in continuity, living fully until life was no longer possible. In remembering the woolly mammoth, we are not only remembering an animal, we are remembering a world that required patience, rather than speed, memory, rather than innovation and balance, rather than growth. The mammoth story ends here, but its lesson does not. And as long as ice preserves bone, as long as grass grows where giants once walked, and as long as humans look backward to understand forward, the woolly mammoth remains present, not alive, but not gone, inside the mammoth. To understand how the woolly mammoth lived as long as it did in conditions that challenged nearly every other large animal, it is necessary to move inward beneath the fur and skin into the systems that worked without rest for decades. The mammoth's survival was not the result of one adaptation, but of many layered together and refined over immense spans of time. The body of a mammoth was built for conservation. Heat was precious. Energy was guarded carefully. Every structure served more than one purpose. Beneath the long outer guard hairs lay a dense undercoat, fine and wool-like, trapping air close to the skin. This trapped air acted as insulation, slowing heat loss even in extreme cold. Beneath the fur, a thick layer of fat added further insulation and functioned as an energy reserve essential during long winters when food was buried beneath ice and snow. The skin itself was thick and resilient, protecting against wind abrasion and minor injuries. Blood vessels near the surface were arranged to minimize heat loss, while deeper circulation ensured that vital organs remained warm. Extremities were shortened deliberately by evolution. Smaller ears reduced surface area exposed to cold. The tail was short and thick. Even the trunk, though long and flexible, contained specialized blood flow control to prevent frost damage. Inside the chest, the lungs were large and efficient, capable of drawing in cold, dry air without damage. The heart was powerful, driving blood through an enormous body across long distances every day. Endurance mattered more than speed. The mammoth was not built to flee quickly, but to move steadily for hours, sometimes days, without collapse. Digestion defined daily existence. The mammoth's stomach and intestines formed a vast processing system, designed to extract energy from grasses and sedges that were low in nutrients but abundant in volume. Food moved slowly through this system, fermented by microbes that broke down cellulose into usable energy. This process generated heat as a byproduct, warming the body from within. Feeding was constant. An adult mammoth spent most of its waking hours eating not out of greed but necessity. Hundreds of kilograms of vegetation passed through its system each day. When food was scarce, fat reserves compensated, but only temporarily. Starvation was slow, not sudden, and always began with the teeth. The mammoth's molars were among the most specialized of any land mammal. Large, ridged, and tightly packed, they formed grinding surfaces, capable of processing abrasive, grit-covered plants. Each mammoth was born with a limited number of molar sets, which erupted sequentially over its lifetime. As older teeth wore down, they were pushed forward and replaced by new ones emerging from the back of the jaw. This system extended life, but it also imposed a limit. When the final molars wore out, feeding efficiency declined sharply. No adaptation could compensate fully. Aging mammoths often continued moving and feeding long after their bodies began to fail, driven by instinct rather than awareness. The skeleton supported immense weight without sacrificing mobility. Bones were thick, but not brittle, structured to distribute stress evenly during long migrations. Joints were reinforced by strong ligaments, allowing steady movement across uneven ground, ice, and snow. Injury was rare but serious. Healing was slow, and a broken limb often meant death. The nervous system balanced caution with calm. Mammoths were not constantly anxious. Panic wasted energy. Instead, they responded selectively, guided by herd signals and learned patterns. This temperament supported group cohesion and reduced unnecessary stress, conserving energy. Over long lives, sleep came lightly. Mammoths rested in short intervals, standing or lying down briefly, never losing full awareness of their surroundings. The brain remained alert to vibrations, sounds, and scents that signaled danger or change. Reproduction taxed the body heavily. Long gestation required sustained energy investment. Lactation demanded even more. Female mammoths often spaced births years apart, allowing time to recover physically before supporting another calf. This slow reproductive rate contributed to population stability in stable environments and vulnerability during rapid change. Every system worked together quietly and continuously without excess. There was no redundancy beyond what survival required. The mammoth did not live fast. It lived efficiently. This efficiency allowed individuals to reach ages comparable to modern elephants, sometimes exceeding 60 years. Over those decades, the body absorbed countless storms, migrations, pregnancies, injuries, and recoveries. But no body, no matter how well adapted, can outpace a world that changes too quickly. The mammoth's anatomy was perfected for cold grasslands that no longer exist in the same form today. When those landscapes faded, the systems that once ensured survival became mismatched to new conditions. Still, for as long as the world allowed, the mammoth endured. One day on the Ice Age plains. Morning did not arrive suddenly on the Ice Age plains. It seeped in slowly, a pale whitening of the horizon that softened the sharp edge of night. The cold remained absolute. Frost clung to hair, ground, and breath alike. For the mammoth, waking was not an event. It was a continuation. The adult mammoth stood quietly, weight shifting from one massive leg to another, muscles warming through subtle movement. The herd remained close, bodies forming a loose constellation across the tundra. No one rushed. Energy was guarded carefully. The mammoth inhaled deeply, cold air filling lungs that had done this same work thousands of mornings before. Feeding began almost immediately. The trunk lowered, sweeping snow aside in practiced arcs, revealing grasses pressed flat beneath ice crystals. Tusks assisted, scraping, lifting, clearing paths, not only for the mammoth itself, but for smaller individuals nearby. Mouthful after mouthful disappeared into a system designed for endless intake. Sound was minimal. The wind carried most of it away. Occasionally, low vibrations passed through the ground as one mammoth communicated with another, messages traveling through bone and earth rather than air. These signals did not demand urgency. They affirmed presence, direction, calm. As light strengthened, movement began. Not migration, not travel with purpose, but gradual repositioning toward areas grazed lightly the previous season. The herd moved as a living mass, slow and deliberate, each individual maintaining awareness of spacing, without needing constant adjustment. Hours passed without clear markers. The mammoth fed continuously, stopping only to reposition or to acknowledge subtle shifts within the group. Calves practiced clearing snow, watched closely but rarely corrected. Juveniles tested their strength briefly, pushing and retreating, then returning to feeding. Midday brought little change in temperature. The sun hung low, weak and distant, offering light without warmth. The mammoth paused briefly, resting its trunk against its chest, eyes half closed but never fully disengaged. Rest was shallow. Awareness remained. Predator presence registered not as fear but as background calculation. A distant movement, a scent carried oddly on the wind. The herd tightened slightly, spacing reduced without command. Feeding continued. Panic was unnecessary. Strength lay in mass and unity. As the afternoon advanced, the mammoth shifted direction subtly, following the matriarch's lead toward a wind-sheltered rise where snow lay thinner. Feeding resumed with renewed efficiency. The body responded automatically, balancing intake and expenditure, storing what it could, releasing heat slowly. The sky began to change color long before the sun approached the horizon. Pale blues deepened into muted golds, then faded again. Shadows stretched across the tundra, long and soft. The mammoth continued its steady rhythm, unconcerned with beauty, attuned only to necessity. Evening brought colder air. Wind sharpened. The herd drew closer, bodies aligning to reduce exposure. The mammoth stood nearly motionless for long stretches now, chewing methodically, conserving movement. The day's intake slowed but did not stop. Night returned as gradually as it had left. Darkness settled without drama. Stars emerged, sharp and numerous. The mammoth shifted position once more, finding a place within the group where wind was broken by larger bodies. It rested, not sleeping deeply, but entering a state of low activity, muscles relaxed yet ready. Breath rose and vanished into the cold. The day ended without conclusion, indistinguishable from the days before and the days to come. This sameness was not monotony. It was a survival. The mammoth lived not through excitement or change, but through consistency, repetition, and endurance. Tomorrow would unfold the same way. And that sameness, repeated across decades, was how giants remained alive in a world that demanded patience above all else. In the next part, the focus will expand again, exploring predators, danger, injury, and death within the mammoth's world, examining how loss was absorbed by the herd, and how mortality shaped behavior without ever halting life's slow rhythm. Predators, injury, and the presence of death, danger was never absent from the mammoth's world. It did not arrive as surprise or chaos. It existed constantly, woven into the background of daily life, acknowledged without obsession. The woolly mammoth did not live in fear of death, yet it never forgot its possibility. Predators shared the Ice Age plains, shaped by the same cold winds and limited resources. Wolves moved in coordinated packs, patient and observant. Large cats waited silently at the edges of visibility, reading movement, spacing, and weakness. Bears emerged opportunistically, drawn by scent rather than pursuit. Each predator understood the same truth. An adult mammoth in good health was nearly untouchable. Predation focused on opportunity, not confrontation. Calves were watched closely, never left unguarded. The herd instinctively formed defensive arrangements. When danger approached, adults positioning themselves outward, tusks angled, bodies aligned, to create a wall of moving mass. These formations required no instruction. They were remembered through generations. When wolves tested the perimeter, the mammoths responded not with pursuit but with presence. A step forward, a unified shift, a low-frequency rumble transmitted through ground and bone. Often this was enough. Predators retreated, conserving energy for more realistic targets. Occasionally, a challenge escalated. A calf strayed. A storm reduced visibility. Ice concealed uneven ground. In these moments, predators pressed closer, probing reactions. The herd tightened, movement slowed, calves pulled inward by trunks and bodies. Violence, when it occurred, was brief and decisive. A charging adult mammoth could kill with a single blow. Tusks, though primarily tools, became weapons when needed. Weight itself was lethal. Predators understood this. Attacks were calculated, rare, and abandoned quickly if resistance proved strong. Injury was more dangerous than predators. A slip on ice, a misjudged step into soft ground, a fall on uneven terrain. These accidents threatened even the strongest adults. A sprained joint reduced mobility. A cracked tusk altered feeding efficiency. Wounds healed slowly in cold environments, and infection was always a risk. The herd responded to injury without ceremony. Movement adjusted, pace slowed. Individuals remained close. There was no abandonment, but neither was there sacrifice. Survival depended on collective balance. If an injured mammoth could continue, it did. If it could not, the herd moved on when staying became impossible. Death arrived quietly. An elderly mammoth lagged behind during migration. A weakened individual failed to rise after rest. Winter claimed those whose teeth could no longer process enough food. These deaths were not dramatic. They were absorbed into the rhythm of life. When a mammoth died, the herd did not gather around the body for long. There was no ritual, no mourning as humans understand it. Instead, there was recognition. Spacing changed. Vocalizations shifted subtly. The absence was noted, not grieved. Scavengers followed: wolves, foxes, birds, even insects during warmer seasons. The mammoth's body returned nutrients to the land that had sustained it. Nothing was wasted. Calves learned from these moments without instruction. They observed loss as part of existence, not as tragedy. Life continued uninterrupted because interruption meant vulnerability. Humans, when they appeared as predators, changed this balance. Unlike wolves or cats, humans returned repeatedly. They learned, they remembered, they adapted faster than mammoths ever could. A single successful hunt fed many people for long periods, encouraging repetition. For mammoths, this new kind of predator did not fit existing patterns. Humans used distance, tools, traps, and coordination beyond anything the mammoth's instincts had evolved to counter. Still, death did not arrive as panic. Mammoths faced humans as they faced all threats through cohesion, strength, and memory. For a long time, it was enough. Eventually, it was not. But even as mortality increased, mammoths did not change their nature. They continued to move, feed, reproduce, and protect calves until the world no longer allowed it. Death was never the end of the story. It was simply another stage within it. In the next part, the focus will turn inward again, exploring the mind of the woolly mammoth, its intelligence, memory, emotions, and social awareness, revealing how cognition shaped survival across decades in a demanding world. Mammoths and humans. For most of their long history, woolly mammoths lived without knowledge of humans. Ice ages rose and fell. Grasslands expanded and contracted. Predators came and went, and mammoths endured, guided by memory rather than change. When humans finally entered the mammoth's world, it was not as conquerors and not at first as hunters, but simply as another animal learning how to survive the cold. Early humans moved slowly across the northern landscapes, following water, vegetation, and migrating herds. They crossed into new continents, using exposed land bridges, including the vast frozen corridor, known as the Bering Land Bridge, a place that did not feel like a bridge at all, but like endless tundra stretching beyond sight. Mammoths had crossed this land for generations without awareness. Humans followed much later, guided by the same resources. At first, encounters were distant. Humans watched mammoths from afar, observing their movements, their habits, and their size. A mammoth was not simply prey. It was a moving landscape of muscle, tusk, and power. Early humans understood risk. Direct confrontation was avoided whenever possible. Instead, humans learned. They learned where mammoths traveled. Seasonally, they learned how herds reacted to wind, storms, and predators. They learned which individuals lagged behind and which routes funneled movement into narrow spaces. This knowledge accumulated quickly passed from one generation to the next through stories, demonstration, and shared experience. For a long time, hunting mammoths was rare. It required coordination, patience, and favorable conditions. Humans relied on smaller game whenever possible. A mammoth hunt was dangerous, exhausting, and uncertain. But when successful, it provided enormous reward. Meat fed communities for weeks. Fat fueled fires and bodies. Bones and tusks became tools, shelter, frames, and symbols. This success encouraged repetition. Humans did not hunt mammoths the way wolves did. They did not rely on speed or teeth. They relied on planning. Groups worked together, driving mammoths toward soft ground, steep embankments, icy rivers, or natural traps where movement became difficult. Spears thrust repeatedly rather than thrown once targeted vulnerable areas over time. The mammoth's instincts were poorly suited to this new kind of predator. Strength, size, and cohesion had always been enough before. Humans attacked from distance, returned repeatedly, and withdrew when threatened only to return again. The mammoth mind, built on memory of predictable dangers, struggled to adapt to a threat. That changed tactics so quickly. Still, coexistence continued for thousands of years. In many regions, mammoths and humans shared the land without immediate collapse. Mammoth populations remained large enough to absorb losses. Climate conditions still supported wide grasslands. Humans were few, but pressure accumulated. As climates warmed, habitats fragmented. Mammoth ranges shrank. Herds became smaller and more isolated. At the same time, human populations grew. Tools improved. Cooperation expanded. What had once been occasional hunting became more frequent. This overlap mattered. Mammoths reproduced slowly. A single calf after long gestation followed by years of dependency meant populations recovered gradually. Humans, by contrast, adapted rapidly. Knowledge transferred efficiently. Mistakes were corrected within generations rather than lifetimes. In some places, humans may have overhunted mammoths directly. In others, hunting pressure combined with habitat loss to push populations beyond recovery. The result varied regionally, but the outcome converged. Mammoths declined. Humans did not witness extinction as a single event. For them, mammoths simply became rarer. Herds appeared less often. Tracks faded from familiar routes. Eventually, mammoths disappeared entirely from regions where they had once been common. The mammoth did not recognize this shift as a species-level crisis. Individuals continued living as they always had, feeding, migrating, reproducing when possible. The end arrived not as awareness but as absence. For humans, mammoths transitioned from living animals to memory and material. Their bones remained in campsites. Their images appeared in cave art. Their tusks persisted long after flesh vanished. Mammoths became part of human culture even as they vanished from the land. This relationship was not one-sided cruelty. Humans depended on mammoths, and mammoths endured humans for millennia. The tragedy lay not in intent but in imbalance. A species adapted for slow change encountered another that accelerated change beyond prediction. In the next part, the story will step back, once more examining scientific evidence for extinction, comparing climate-driven decline, human impact, and the final synthesis that explains how the woolly mammoth truly disappeared. Why the mammoths vanished. The disappearance of the woolly mammoth was not a mystery solved by a single answer. It was a question that unfolded slowly, layer by layer, across decades of research, frozen remains, ancient pollen, and genetic code preserved in ice. What emerged was not a dramatic collapse, but a convergence. Multiple forces acted together, each weakening the mammoth's resilience, until survival was no longer possible. Climate change was the first pressure to arrive, and the longest lasting. As the last ice age ended, temperatures rose unevenly across the northern hemisphere. This warming did not simply make the world gentler, it reshaped it. The vast steppe tundra ecosystem that had sustained mammoths for hundreds of thousands of years began to fragment. Grasses that thrived in cold, dry conditions were replaced by shrubs, wetlands, and eventually forests. Snow patterns changed, becoming deeper and more insulating, preventing the deep ground freezing that once preserved open grasslands. For mammoths, this shift mattered profoundly. Their bodies, teeth, digestion, and behavior were adapted specifically for grazing on tough, abrasive grasses across open terrain. As those grasses declined, food quality dropped. Feeding required more effort for less reward. Migration routes that once linked seasonal resources broke apart. Memory, once reliable, became increasingly misleading. Alone. Climate change did not immediately cause extinction. Mammoths had survived previous warming periods. What made this one different was its speed and direction, combined with new pressures. Human impact arrived next, not as a sudden invasion, but as a gradual accumulation. Humans spread into mammoth ranges following the same ecological corridors. They learned quickly. They cooperated. They passed knowledge efficiently between generations. Even low levels of hunting pressure could have long-term effects on a species with slow reproduction. A mammoth calf took years to mature. A single loss mattered more than it would for faster breeding animals. When hunting coincided with habitat fragmentation, recovery became difficult. When populations shrank and became isolated, recovery became unlikely. Archaeological evidence shows that in some regions, mammoth populations declined soon after humans arrived. In others, mammoths and humans coexisted for thousands of years before disappearance. This variability suggests that humans were not the sole cause everywhere, but that their presence intensified existing vulnerabilities. Genetics provided further insight. Studies of mammoth DNA revealed population bottlenecks, periods when numbers dropped sharply and diversity declined. In isolated groups, Harmful mutations accumulated over time, reducing fertility, immune function, and overall resilience. These changes did not kill mammoths outright. They weakened populations already under stress. The final mammoth populations, especially those isolated on islands, illustrate this convergence clearly. On Rangel Island, mammoths survived thousands of years longer than their mainland relatives. The climate remained cold enough. Human presence was minimal. For a time, the balance held. But isolation brought genetic decline. With limited mates and resources, resilience eroded quietly. When environmental challenges intensified or humans eventually arrived, even lightly, the population could not recover. The end came not through catastrophe but through exhaustion. Other theories were proposed and tested. Disease, catastrophic storms, cosmic events. None provided consistent evidence across regions. What remained consistent was overlap, climate stress, human pressure, genetic weakening. Together, they formed a narrowing corridor through which mammoths could no longer pass. This understanding reshaped how extinction is viewed. The woolly mammoth did not fail because it was poorly adapted. It failed because it was too well adapted to a world that no longer existed. Its strength was specialization. Its vulnerability was dependence. Extinction in this case was not a moment, it was a process, a slow fading of presence, a thinning of tracks, a quiet end of births. The last mammoth lived and died without awareness that it carried an ending. With it, from a scientific perspective, this matters deeply. It demonstrates how large, long-lived species are especially vulnerable to rapid environmental change, combined with even modest human impact. It reframes extinction not as a single cause, but as a system failure. The mammoth's disappearance was not inevitable until it was. And once it was, nothing could reverse it. In the next part, the documentary will turn toward what remains after extinction. Exploring mammoth fossils, frozen bodies, modern research, and what these ancient giants continue to reveal about biology, climate, and the future of life on a changing planet. What remains? After extinction, the woolly mammoth did not vanish completely. It entered another state of existence, one defined not by breath and movement, but by preservation and discovery. The cold that once sustained mammoth life became the force that protected its remains, holding bodies, bones, and even soft tissue in suspended time. Across the northern regions of Eurasia and North America, mammoth remains rested beneath layers of frozen ground. Permafrost sealed them away, preventing decay, slowing bacteria, and preserving details that rarely survive in the fossil record. Hair remained attached to skin. Muscles retained structure. Organs lay where they had fallen. In some cases, the last meals eaten by mammoths thousands of years earlier remained intact. Within their stomachs, these frozen individuals were not symbols, they were records. When humans encountered mammoth remains, reactions varied across history. Early discoveries inspired myths. Tusks were traded, carved, and mistaken for the bones of giants or monsters. Only with the rise of systematic science did these remains begin to speak clearly, revealing the mammoth's life not through story but through evidence. Bones mapped anatomy. Tooth wear revealed age and diet. Growth rings within tusks recorded seasons like tree rings, preserving information about climate, stress, and reproduction across decades of an individual's life. Each ring marked a period of growth or hardship, creating a timeline written in ivory. Frozen carcasses told deeper stories. Hair analysis revealed seasonal shedding and coat density. Fat layers showed how energy was stored and lost. Muscle condition indicated health at death. Even parasites were preserved, offering insight into diseases and internal ecosystems that once lived within mammoths. The land itself recorded mammoth presence. Trampled soils compacted layers beneath ancient grazing grounds. Pollen trapped in sediments showed shifts in vegetation following mammoth decline. In places where mammoths vanished, shrubs and trees spread, altering soil chemistry and water retention. These changes did not reverse when mammoths disappeared. They continued. Modern science approached mammoth remains with tools the mammoths could never have anticipated. Radiocarbon dating established timelines. Isotopic analysis revealed diet and migration patterns. DNA sequencing unlocked genetic relationships, confirming the mammoth's close connection to modern elephants and tracing population declines across time. From these studies emerged a clearer picture. Mammoths were not fragile relics undone by a single mistake. They were robust, adaptable animals that endured extraordinary conditions for extraordinary lengths of time. Their extinction was not a failure of strength, but of circumstance. Preserved mammoths also revealed individuality. Some showed healed injuries, evidence of survival after trauma. Others bore signs of malnutrition or disease. Some died suddenly, trapped in mud or ice. Others faded slowly, their bodies showing signs of prolonged stress. Each individual told a different ending. Museums became places where mammoths returned to visibility. Skeletons were reconstructed, sometimes inaccurately at first, later refined, through better understanding of posture and movement. Early reconstructions portrayed mammoths as hunched and clumsy. Modern ones show them upright, powerful, and dynamic, more closely resembling living elephants adapted for cold. Public fascination followed. Mammoths became ambassadors of the Ice Age, symbols of lost worlds and deep time. They appeared in art, literature, and education, shaping how humans imagine extinction itself. Yet beyond fascination, mammoth remains changed science. They demonstrated the power of cold preservation. They showed how climate can lock biological information away for millennia. They provided rare opportunities to study extinct megafauna at a level of detail usually reserved for living species. Most importantly, they offered context. The mammoth's remains revealed how ecosystems function when large herbivores dominate. They showed what happens when those herbivores vanish. They highlighted the interconnectedness of climate, vegetation, animals, and humans. What remains of the mammoth is not only bone and ice. It is understanding. In the next part, the documentary will look forward as well as back, exploring modern experiments inspired by mammoths, the rewilding efforts in ecosystem restoration. and the controversial discussions surrounding genetic revival and extinction. The Mammoth and the Future. The story of the woolly mammoth does not end where its bones rest. It continues quietly in laboratories, tundra experiments, and long conversations about responsibility, restraint, and repair. Long after the last mammoth fell, humans began to ask not only why it vanished, but what its absence changed, and whether anything could or should be done in response. One idea emerged slowly, shaped by observation rather than nostalgia. The mammoth had been an ecosystem engineer. Its grazing maintained grasslands. Its movement compacted snow. Its presence cooled soils and stabilized permafrost. Without mammoths, these processes weakened. If mammoths could not return, perhaps their function could. This thinking led to rewilding experiments in northern regions, where scientists introduced large herbivores to replicate parts of the mammoth's ecological role. Horses, bison, musk oxen, and other grazers were released into controlled areas to observe how vegetation, soil temperature, and snow cover responded. In places like Pleistocene Park, results suggested that heavy grazing could shift landscapes away from shrub-dominated tundra back toward grasslands, altering carbon storage and local climate dynamics. These projects were not attempts to recreate the past. They were attempts to understand it well enough to guide the future. Grasslands reflect more sunlight than forests. They store carbon differently. They interact with snow and permafrost in ways that may slow warming in some regions. The mammoth, once unknowingly, had participated in these processes. Alongside rewilding, another idea captured public imagination: genetic revival. Advances in DNA sequencing allowed scientists to reconstruct large portions of the mammoth genome using material preserved in ice. These sequences revealed genes associated with cold tolerance, fat metabolism, hair growth, and blood circulation. Comparisons with modern elephants identified where mammoths differed and how those differences shaped survival in extreme cold. Some researchers proposed using gene editing to introduce mammoth-like traits into modern elephant cells. The goal was not to recreate a mammoth exactly, but to restore lost adaptations that could allow elephants to survive in colder environments, potentially filling ecological roles once held by mammoths. This idea raised immediate questions, ethical questions about creating organisms for human purposes, ecological questions about introducing large animals into modern environments altered by thousands of years of change, practical questions about welfare, habitat suitability, and unintended consequences. Supporters argued that humans had helped drive mammoths to extinction and therefore carried responsibility to explore restoration. Critics argued that reviving traits or organisms could distract from protecting species currently at risk. Both perspectives recognize the same truth: the mammoth story is inseparable from human choice. Even without genetic revival, the mammoth continues to guide scientific thinking. It serves as a model for understanding how slow reproducing, highly specialized species respond to rapid environmental change. It informs conservation strategies for modern megafauna facing similar pressures. It shapes how scientists interpret fossil records and climate signals. The mammoth also reshapes cultural understanding of extinction. It challenges the idea that extinction is always sudden or dramatic. It shows how disappearance can occur quietly generation by generation without awareness or alarm, until absence becomes permanent. In this sense, the mammoth is not only a creature of the past, it is a reference point for the present. Its life cycle reminds us that adaptation has limits, that memory can guide survival only while the world remains recognizable. That resilience built over hundreds of thousands of years can be undone in a fraction of that time. Looking forward, the mammoth offers no instructions. It offers perspective. It asks whether humans will recognize slow change before it becomes irreversible, whether restoration will be pursued with humility rather than control, whether the lessons preserved in ice will be applied with care rather than urgency. The mammoth does not demand return. It demands understanding. In the next and final part, the documentary will settle into a long, quiet closing, reflecting on the full life cycle of the woolly mammoth from birth to extinction, weaving together biology, memory, landscape, and time, designed as an extended, sleep-focused outro that allows the story to fade naturally, just as the mammoth itself once did. A quiet ending. The life of the woolly mammoth did not move toward an ending with awareness. It moved forward the same way it always had, step by steady step, guided by hunger, memory, and the quiet pull of the land. Birth led to growth. Growth led to endurance. Endurance carried the mammoth across years that blurred together, marked only by the return of cold, the thinning of snow, the brief softness of summer, and the long return of winter. From the first breath drawn into frozen lungs, the mammoth lived within a rhythm older than thought. It followed the herd. It followed the matriarch. It followed roots worn not into the ground but into memory. Each generation walked where others had walked before, not knowing they were repeating history, only knowing that movement meant survival. Calves learned without instruction. They learned where to stand when the wind sharpened. They learned how to clear snow, how to follow vibrations through the earth, how to recognize safety in closeness. They learned that strength was not speed and that life was sustained not by urgency but by consistency. As years passed, the mammoth grew large, heavy, and strong. Its body carried the weight of adaptation, shaped across hundreds of thousands of years. Fur held warmth. Fat stored seasons. Tusks worked the land. Teeth ground grasses endlessly, day after day, night after night, without pause or complaint. Adulthood brought responsibility without ceremony. The mammoth did not choose its role. It lived it. It protected calves by standing where danger approached. It fed without excess. It rested without indulgence. It moved when the herd moved and stopped when the herd stopped. Life unfolded without narrative, without meaning, beyond continuation. Time passed. Storms came and went. Predators tested and retreated. Calves were born and grew. Elders slowed and fell behind. Death arrived quietly, absorbed by the land without acknowledgement. Nothing broke, nothing stopped. The herd adjusted and life continued. Then the world shifted. The changes were not sudden enough to demand panic. They were subtle enough to be endured at first. Grasslands narrowed. Snow behaved differently. Rivers flowed where none had before. Memory became less reliable. Routes that once worked led to less food. Seasons arrived out of order. Still, the mammoth endured. Humans appeared not as monsters, not as villains, but as another presence on the land. For a long time, coexistence held. Then pressure grew. Then balance thinned. Then recovery slowed. The mammoth did not understand extinction. It did not know it was becoming rare. It did not recognize the narrowing of possibility. It continued living as mammoths always had, fully, completely, without anticipation of an end. The last mammoth walked beneath a sky as vast as any that came before it. It fed, it breathed, it followed instinct until instinct could no longer carry it forward. When it fell, the world did not change suddenly. The wind moved as it always had. Snow fell. Grass grew and bent beneath cold light. Silence expanded slowly. What remained was not emptiness but absence. An absence that altered soil, vegetation, and memory itself. An absence that humans would notice only much later, when bones emerged from ice and stories began to form around what had been lost. Today, the woolly mammoth exists only in fragments, in frozen tissue, in genetic code, in reconstructed skeletons standing quietly in museums, in landscapes that still bear the faint signature of heavy footsteps pressed into ancient ground. Its life cycle is complete: birth, growth, endurance, aging. Disappearance. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, only time doing what time always does. As this story fades, it returns to the same quiet from which it began. Wind moving across open land, grass bending beneath cold air, the earth remembering shapes long after bodies are gone. The mammoth does not ask to be revived. It does not ask to be mourned. It asks only to be understood. And in understanding it, we understand something of the world itself, how life persists, how it adapts, how it fades, slowly, quietly, without breaking the rhythm of the earth. The story rests here. After the silence, long after the last mammoth's warmth faded into the frozen ground, the land remained. It did not pause. It did not mark the passing of an age. Wind continued to move across open spaces, shaping snow into familiar curves. Ice formed and fractured. Seasons followed one another with the same patience they always had. The absence of mammoths did not create emptiness all at once. At first, it was subtle. Grasses grew taller in places once grazed short. Snow lay deeper where heavy bodies no longer pressed it down. The ground softened differently beneath winter's cover. These changes did not announce themselves. They accumulated quietly. Other animals adapted to the altered rhythm. Some expanded, some retreated. Predators adjusted their routes. Plants reshaped the landscape, slowly filling spaces once cleared by tusks and trunks. Over generations, the memory of mammoths faded from the living world, surviving only in the land's altered patterns. Time moved forward without witness. Ice advanced again in places, then withdrew. Rivers shifted their courses. Coastlines changed shape as seas rose and fell. Humans settled, moved, returned, and moved again. Civilizations formed far from the tundra, unaware that the soil beneath their feet still held the chemistry shaped by Ice Age giants. The mammoth story became buried not just beneath ice, but beneath forgetting. Yet forgetting was never complete. From time to time, the earth released fragments, a tusk emerging from eroding riverbanks, a skull revealed by melting permafrost, hair still clinging to skin preserved against time. Each discovery was quiet, almost accidental, yet each carried an entire life within it. Science listened where myth once spoke. Through these remains, the mammoth returned, not as a living creature, but as understanding. Researchers traced migration through isotopes, reconstructed diets from pollen and stomach contents, measured stress through growth patterns locked in ivory. Each method added detail not to resurrect the mammoth, but to complete its story. And still, the land remained calm. Night fell on the tundra as it always had. Stars burned, cold and distant. Wind moved across plains that no longer felt the vibration of heavy footsteps. Silence did not mean absence of life. It meant continuity without the mammoth. This is what extinction looks like when viewed through deep time. Not collapse, not ruin, but adjustment. Life does not stop when one form disappears. It reshapes itself slowly without intention. The woolly mammoth lived fully within its moment in the world. It did not rush. It did not waste energy on futures it could not imagine. It endured until endurance was no longer possible. That is not tragedy, that is completion. As this final chapter settles, the story no longer moves forward, it rests. It becomes part of the background, like wind, like soil, like time itself. There is nothing left to explain, nothing left to warn, nothing left to add, only quiet continuity. If this documentary is heard in darkness, let the darkness remain gentle. If it is heard in sleep, let sleep deepen. The mammoth's footsteps have faded. The earth continues, and this is enough. The world breathes on beyond stories and science, beyond memory and evidence. There is a quieter truth that remains when everything else has been said. The world does not need witnesses to continue. It does not pause for endings. It breathes on slowly and without preference, carrying forward whatever life remains within it. The tundra, once shaped by countless generations of mammoth, settles into its own rhythm. Snow falls where it will. Grass bends where the wind tells it to bend. In summer, light lingers long into the night, touching the ground, gently warming soil that still remembers pressure from ancient feet. In winter, darkness returns, patiently wrapping the land in cold that feels familiar, even without the bodies that once depended on it. Time smooths everything. The marks left by mammoths soften further each year. Paths fade. Compacted soil loosens. Plants grow where they were once grazed. The transformation is not correction or loss. It is continuity. The land does not seek to restore the past. It accepts the present as it is. Somewhere beneath the surface, bone rests in silence. Ivory lies buried, layered with centuries of ice and sediment. Hair, still fine and pale, remains where it fell, protected by cold that outlives generations. These remnants do not speak unless uncovered. They wait without urgency. The mammoth's life cycle is complete not because it ended, but because it fulfilled its time. Birth followed by growth, growth followed by endurance, endurance followed by fading. Nothing more was required. In deep time, this is how all lives pass, not with meaning assigned afterward, not with lessons demanded, but with presence given fully while it lasts. The mammoth lived in balance with its world until the balance changed. When it could no longer adapt, it did not resist, simply ceased. This acceptance is not sadness, it is a perspective. The earth has held many giants. It will hold others or perhaps none again. Forms change, scale changes. Life expresses itself differently across eras that barely touch one another. The mammoth belongs to its era completely, just as this moment belongs to another. As this final part settles, there is nothing left to carry forward except quiet awareness. Awareness that life is temporary. Awareness that landscapes remember longer than bodies. Awareness that even the largest creatures leave without disturbance when their time is complete. Let the wind continue. Let the snow fall softly. Let the grass grow where it will. The woolly mammoth rests within the long memory of the earth. And the earth continues a patient, silent, unchanged by remembrance. The earth without footsteps. There is a moment far beyond history and explanation when the earth exists without expectation. No tracks appear in the snow. No heavy bodies compress the ground. The wind crosses the plains without resistance, shaping drifts that will never be disturbed by tusks or trunks. This is not loss. It is simply the world continuing in a different form. The Ice Age plains no longer belong to anyone. They are not claimed by species or memory. They exist as open space beneath a wide sky, holding cold and light with equal patience. The mammoth is no longer absent here. Absence itself has faded. What remains is neutrality, a balance that does not remember what once filled it. Time stretches until it loses meaning. Thousands of years pass as easily as moments. Ice advances and retreats. Soil freezes and thaws. Life comes and goes in smaller forms adapted to narrower margins. Nothing rushes, nothing pauses. The earth does not measure success or failure. It only accommodates what arrives. Somewhere beneath layers of sediment and frost, ivory rests in darkness. Not hidden, not lost, simply resting. The calcium and carbon that once supported immense weight now wait quietly, participating in cycles far slower than life. Eventually, even these traces will dissolve completely, becoming indistinguishable from the ground that holds them. This is the final transformation, not extinction but absorption. The mammoth no longer exists as an animal, a symbol, or a lesson. It exists as matter, energy, and memory diffused so completely that it cannot be separated from the world itself. The earth does not carry stories, it carries continuity. If this documentary has moved slowly, it is because the mammoth lived slowly. If it ends without resolution, it is because the mammoth's end had none. There was no final sound, no final moment, only the gradual quieting of presence. Let the wind continue its endless movement. Let snow fall without interruption. Let light arrive and fade without witness. The woolly mammoth has finished its passage through time. The earth remains, and in that remaining everything is complete. The long quiet after all movement has faded. There remains a kind of quiet that does not feel empty. It feels settled. The land holds its shape without effort. The sky stretches without demand. The cold arrives and leaves on its own schedule, indifferent to whether anything notices. In this quiet, there is no urgency, no reason for direction. The plains exist as they are, wide and patient, carrying layers of time, the way snow carries light. What once crossed them has been absorbed so completely that distinction no longer matters. Life that shaped the land has become part of the land. The wind passes low over the ground, lifting fine crystals of snow, laying them down again. Elsewhere, patterns form and dissolve without consequence. Nothing needs to be preserved. Nothing needs to be remembered. Continuity does not require attention. This is the state the mammoth ultimately returned to. Not absence but stillness. Not erasure but integration. The elements that once composed muscle, bone, and fur now participate in slower cycles, moving through soil, ice, and water, changing form without identity. Time continues, but it is no longer counted. There are no seasons here that feel urgent. Winter does not threaten. Summer does not promise. Light arrives and departs gently, touching the surface and moving on. Night settles without closing anything. If listening continues, let it be without expectation. If silence follows, let it remain unbroken. Nothing more is required of this story. Nothing more needs to be said. The woolly mammoth has completed its presence. The land has completed its receiving. The long quiet holds. What remains unspoken beyond all chapters, beyond explanation and reflection? There is a state where the world no longer needs to be described. It simply is. The tundra rests beneath a sky that does not change its expression for anyone. Snow gathers and loosens. Ice breathes in slow expansions and releases. Nothing presses the land anymore, and nothing expects to. In this space, the idea of before and after loses its meaning. The mammoth's passage through time has dissolved into the same quiet that receives everything eventually. Not as loss, not as forgetting, as a completion. The world does not keep accounts. It does not separate what mattered from what did not. It carries everything forward in equal measure. Silence here is not empty. It is full of continuity, the kind that does not need sound to exist. Wind touches the surface and moves on. Light arrives, pauses briefly, and leaves without leaving marks. The ground holds its temperature, its minerals, its slow internal movements unchanged by memory. If there is comfort in this ending, it comes from understanding that nothing essential has disappeared. The mammoth's life was never meant to last forever. It was meant to happen, and it did, completely, fully, without interruption. All cycles return to stillness. All motion becomes rest. This is not an ending that closes something. It is an ending that releases it. Let the story remain unfinished in the way nature prefers. Let quiet be the final companion. Nothing more follows. Nothing needs to. Where time softens here. Not by stopping and not by moving faster, but by losing its edges. Moments no longer separate themselves from one another. They blend like snow settling into older snow until there is no clear boundary between what came before and what follows after. The land breathes in this softness. Cold moves through it slowly, evenly. Light touches the surface without insistence. Nothing arrives too soon. Nothing stays too long. The balance holds without effort. Once great bodies crossed these plains, their movement pressed meaning into the ground simply by being there. Now the ground rests without that weight, not relieved, not diminished, simply changed. Change does not judge. What preceded it? Wind travels low, shaping gentle curves in snow that will smooth again by morning. These patterns are temporary, and that is enough. No mark is meant to last. No presence is meant to remain distinct forever. The mammoth has already returned to this state, not as an animal remembered, not as a symbol held, but as part of the slow circulation of matter and energy that never pauses. What once lived now participates quietly, indistinguishable from earth, ice, and air. This is the calm beyond stories. Here explanation dissolves naturally, thought relaxes, attention loosens its grip. There is nothing to follow, nothing to anticipate, only the steady continuation of the world exactly as it is. If listening continues, let it drift. If sleep comes, let it deepen. The mammoth's path has faded completely into the land. The land has accepted it without sound. Time softens, and the world rests. The gentle continuum, there is a calm that arrives when even stillness no longer feels new. It is the calm of continuity, where the world proceeds without effort, without witness, without need for attention. The tundra holds this calm easily. It has learned to do so across ages that pass like slow breaths. Snow settles not to cover but to belong. Wind traces faint lines and releases them again. Light moves across the land, as if it were thinking, then lets the thought go. No step interrupts the surface. No weight asks the ground to remember. The space remains open, receptive, complete. Here time does not announce itself. It does not count or collect. It simply flows wide and even, carrying everything forward until distinction dissolves. What once had shape now has presence without outline. What once had motion now has participation without direction. The mammoth story has already joined this flow. It does not sit apart. It does not echo. It does not return as an image. It moves as warmth once stored, as minerals once arranged, as pathways once pressed into soil that has since softened. Nothing is lost in this movement. Nothing is held back. The land does not miss what it no longer carries. It accommodates what arrives next. That is its only task, and it performs it without strain. If there is a lesson here, it does not need words. It exists in the way the horizon remains steady while clouds change, in the way snow accepts every fall as equal, in the way silence feels full rather than empty. Allow the pace to slow further. Allow thought to loosen. There is no conclusion waiting. There is only continuation, gentle and unbroken. The world remains at ease. The slow carrying, there is a way the earth carries what is past without holding it tightly, not as memory and not as loss, but as continuation. The tundra does this naturally. It does not preserve shapes forever. It allows them to soften, to settle, to become a part of everything else. Snow falls and melts. Ice forms and releases. Soil shifts its layers slowly, almost imperceptibly. What once pressed into the ground is now distributed through it, no longer separate, no longer distinct. This is not forgetting. It is inclusion. The mammoth's presence has moved into this quiet state. The warmth it once held has long since spread outward. The minerals that shaped bone and tusk have entered wider cycles, traveling through water and stone, changing form without urgency. Nothing rushes, nothing resists. Time here does not advance in steps, it drifts. Days are not counted. Seasons do not announce themselves. Light arrives, lingers briefly, and departs with the same calm. That brings it back again. The land accepts each moment as sufficient. If there is movement, it is subtle, a faint shift in wind, a soft settling of snow, a gradual change in color as the sky breathes. These motions do not point anywhere. They do not require attention. They simply occur. This is the pace that remains after stories have finished telling themselves. The mammoth's life, once vast and heavy, now rests lightly within this flow. It no longer asks anything of the world. The world no longer asks anything of it. Balance has been reached not through effort but through time. Let listening soften here. Let thought release its shape. Nothing new needs to be added. Nothing old needs to be kept. The earth carries on gently, holding everything that has passed without holding it still. The quiet that holds everything. There is a quiet that does not follow sound. It exists on its own. It is the quiet of land that no longer needs to remember what walked upon it. Not because it has forgotten, but because remembering is no longer necessary. The tundra holds this quiet naturally, the way ice holds cold, the way the sky holds distance. Nothing presses down here anymore. Nothing lifts away. Snow arrives gently and leaves just as gently. Wind moves across the surface without shaping anything that must last. The ground accepts every change as temporary, every stillness as complete. There is no preference for motion or rest. Both are equal. The mammoth no longer exists as a subject within this space. Its weight, once immense, has thinned into participation. Its presence is spread so widely that it cannot be separated from the earth that carries it. There is no center to return to, no outline to trace. This is not disappearance. It is diffusion. Time no longer feels linear here. It does not move forward or backward. It expands outward evenly until direction loses meaning. Moments are not stacked. They overlap softly like layers of snow that become indistinguishable from one another. If the mind searches for an ending, it will not find one. If it searches for a beginning, it will not find that either. The world does not divide itself that way. There is only continuation, steady and unremarkable, the kind that requires no attention to function, the kind that allows everything to settle exactly where it belongs. Let awareness rest inside this calm. Let silence remain untouched. Nothing more is unfolding now. Nothing needs to. The woolly mammoth has fully returned to the world that shaped it, and the world continues quietly whole. The rest that remains, there is a rest that does not belong to sleep. It belongs to completion. The land enters it without effort. The sky holds it without strain. Snow settles into it as if it were always meant to arrive exactly this way. Nothing waits for what comes next because nothing is missing from what already is. Here the rhythm is so slow it feels like no rhythm at all. The ground cools and warms within narrow margins. Light thins and deepens without urgency. Wind passes through and leaves no demand behind it. The world does not lean toward the future. It rests within itself. The mammoth is fully part of this rest now, not as a memory recalled, not as an absence noticed, but as a presence dispersed. The distinction between animal and earth has softened until it no longer matters where one ends and the other begins. What once moved now participates. What once endured now belongs. This is the quiet that follows endurance. No lesson presses forward. No meaning insists on being named. The story has already given what it had to give by living. Explanation would only disturb what has settled. If listening continues, let it become background. If silence grows, let it remain unbroken. The world does not require attention to continue. It has been doing this for a very long time. Everything that needed to arrive has arrived. Everything that needed to pass has passed. The rest that remains is enough. The even breathing of the earth, there is a steadiness that arrives when all movement has found its place. Not a pause, not an end, a balance. The earth breathes evenly here. Cold and warmth exchange slowly without contrast sharp enough to be noticed. Snow settles into hollows and smooths them. Wind travels across the surface and forgets where it has been. Nothing leaves a mark that asks to remain. This is the pace beneath everything. The mammoth's life has long since joined this pace. What once required strength now requires nothing at all. What once depended on endurance now rests within cycles so broad they do not feel like cycles. Bone has become mineral, heat has become atmosphere. Motion has become stillness that does not need to be named. There is no center here, no edge, only space holding itself. If awareness drifts, let it drift. If thought quiets, let it quiet. The world does not ask to be followed. It does not ask to be understood. It continues evenly, patiently carrying everything that has ever passed through it without effort, without memory, without loss. The woolly mammoth is no longer separate from this breathing, and the breathing goes on, the world at ease. There is a point where even balance becomes unnoticed, where steadiness no longer feels like something achieved but something that has always been there. The land reaches this state without effort. Sky rests into its width. Snow lies where it falls and feels no need to become anything else. The world does not wait. It does not remember. It simply remains open and sufficient. Here motion is so gentle it feels like rest. Change happens without contrast. One moment gives way to the next without marking the transition. Time is not passing through this place. It is spread evenly across it. The mammoth's presence has thinned into this calm. Completely, not hidden, not lost, dissolved into participation so total that separation no longer applies. What once had form now has belonging. Nothing carries weight anymore. Nothing needs support. If the mind searches for significance, it may relax. Significance has already been fulfilled by existence itself. The mammoth lived. The land received. The exchange is complete. Let listening become effortless. Let silence settle fully. There is nothing more approaching. There is nothing left behind. The world is at ease, the still continuance. There is a stillness that does not oppose movement, it allows it. The land settles into this allowance without effort. Snow rests where it lands. Wind moves across the surface and leaves no request behind it. Light arrives softly, touches the ground, and withdraws without leaving an impression that needs to last. Nothing here is waiting to happen. Time has loosened its shape. It no longer gathers moments or releases them. It spreads evenly like cold across open ground, like quiet across a wide plain. The distinction between earlier and later dissolves until only presence remains. The mammoth's life has merged fully with this presence, not remembered, not recalled, but included. What once required nourishment now circulates as matter. What once required warmth now drifts as energy. The form has finished and the participation continues. There is no absence to notice, no fullness to preserve. If attention wanders, let it wander. If silence grows, let it grow. Nothing needs to be held in place. Nothing needs to be released. The world continues in the simplest way it knows how, by being exactly what it is, without effort, without witness, the ease of continuation. There is a way the world continues that does not feel like movement. It feels like allowance. The land rests into this allowance naturally. Snow accepts where it falls. Wind crosses the plain without carving intention into it. The sky holds its wide shape without effort or display. Nothing seeks to become more than it is. Change still happens here. It simply does not announce itself. Cold deepens and releases. Light shifts its tone. The surface of the earth rearranges itself grain by grain, too slowly to notice, too gently to resist. This is how continuity expresses itself when there is no urgency left. The mammoth's presence has fully dissolved into this ease. What once moved with weight now moves as part of everything else. What once required strength now requires nothing. There is no separation to return to, no form to recover. This is not disappearance. It is belonging without outline. If awareness lingers, let it linger lightly. If it fades, let it fade without concern. There is nothing here that needs interpretation. Nothing that asks to be carried forward deliberately. The earth continues as it always has, not by holding on, but by letting everything settle exactly where it belongs. The unhurried present. There is a present that does not hurry forward. It does not pull the world with it. It simply remains wide enough for everything to pass through. The tundra lives inside this present. Snow gathers without intention. Wind crosses the open ground without direction. Light shifts its angle and softens again, leaving no trace that asks to be followed. The surface changes, but the feeling does not. This is the rhythm beneath all rhythms. The mammoth has already entered it fully. What once required days and distances now exists without duration. What once depended on seasons now belongs to cycles. Too broad to feel. There is no return to form and no loss of it either. Only participation spread thin and even. Time here does not point forward, it rests outward. Moments overlap gently like layers of snow that melt into one another until there is no edge to notice. Nothing begins sharply. Nothing ends clearly. The world continues by remaining open. If listening continues, let it be without effort. If quiet deepens, let it deepen on its own. There is nothing arriving late. There is nothing left behind. The earth holds the present the way it always has, patiently, without preference, and without need to move on.